Hey, welcome back to the Beards and Business Show. I'm your host, Anthony Pacheco. Today from Nashville, Tennessee, I have Randy Howell, president of GBS. Randy actually was born and raised, he's considered a unicorn there in the Nashville, Tennessee area. He was born and raised in Nashville, Tennessee, and he has been in the employee benefits sector since in utero. Very unique there. On top of that, he graduated from Lipscomb University where he played tennis and is a marketing major. Hey, Randy, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Anthony. Excited to be on today.
Absolutely. We're gonna jump right in. Randy, our audience really loves to know who's coming on the show and a little bit about them. So take us through a little bit of your personal life, who you are, where tell us a little bit about growing up in Nashville, Tennessee.
Yeah, as you said in your intro, born and raised in Nashville, so it'll be 45 years in about 2.5 weeks. I've been living in Nashville before Nashville was cool, before Nashville was the it city. It was the sleepy southern town that everybody wouldn't come visit, wouldn't move here. And not to say that I hate growth. The growth has been good for the city for the most part. But born and raised Nashville, grew up in the Green Hills area, went to an all-boys private high school here in Nashville called Montgomery Bell Academy, where I played competitive tennis there. And then that led to a college tennis scholarship where I played at Lipscomb, played number one for 4 years over there. All along the way, my mom and dad worked in the employee benefit space. My dad started group benefit systems in 1978. Now there was some planning that went in before that. So we've got to assume that while I was in utero with my mom, I was starting to learn the key terminology in insurance. And that's when insurance was affordable, like $50 single premiums. But anyway,
Different world.
Grew up around the business, did some internships with them throughout my college career. That wasn't my first job. My first job was actually in the tennis world, working at the local swim and tennis club.
Cool.
Just as a youngster, so I could just be around tennis because that was my livelihood. Went to Lipscomb, played college tennis, and then graduated from Lipscomb. I went to work directly for my dad right after school. I ended up working with him for about 3 years, and then we had the decision to make employer-employee or father-son. And so the father-son relationship won out, and so at that point, went on my own way before coming back to the family firm in 2012.
Awesome. So I want to dig into something real quick before we jump too far into the business sector, because I think this is something really awesome. So you played tennis at college. You obviously played tennis in high school, correct?
Correct.
Yep. And you said that you worked at your local swim and tennis club. So tell us a little bit about that.
So in my backyard where I grew up playing tennis was this place called Seven Hills. It's still there today. Still got the same, the pool set up, still got the same tennis court set up. And so they had this little pro shop, and you would be in there checking people in, taking court reservations, emptying the trash, picking up tennis balls. If it rains, squeegeeing the courts, which was the worst possible thing to have to do when you play tennis, is squeegee the courts. Because just imagine taking a piece of cardboard trying to push water on asphalt. It's just not efficient. So technology luckily has come a long way. But it was really neat because it was right in my backyard. It was the days where you could walk safely or ride your bike safely to the neighborhood swim and tennis club. Did that, and so I was able to still be around tennis and be around people that I knew, because if I wasn't there working, I was there playing tennis and swimming. So it was a really, really fun experience.
Yeah. So interesting story about my background. I grew up in the country club industry, and so played a lot of golf. And so when you said that tennis club piece, that really resonated with me, because I remember our tennis pro and all of the people that work in there. I mean, they had a team of probably 15 people. And I think we had like 16 courts or something like that at our country club. And so, there was always just a crap ton of tennis players that would come up, and, then they would come into the grill afterwards and eat and, hang out. But that tennis culture was a unique culture. It was very different than the golf culture. And, it was much more family. Like the group in the community was much more family oriented. together as a community versus the golf community, which was you had your little cliques. And I know tennis had their cliques too, but it's still together. Everybody kind of came back together in the tennis. Was it similar to that in Nashville?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of similarities between golf and tennis. Tennis is a very individualized sport. If you're playing singles, you have a little bit of a team aspect. If you're playing doubles, and then if you're part of a much larger team, a high school team, a college team, now they have countless USTA leagues. You get that team aspect, and there's similarities with golf. And when you play golf, and I've since have picked up the sticks and started playing more golf than I do tennis. And it's the same premise. You're out there by yourself, but then you also have the opportunity to play in a group setting, potentially a team format. But the community of tennis was very unique. It was one of those that you always congregated around, before watching matches, talking, and then after. In the competitive scene, I think much like life, typically the people you played, you were competitive on the court, you respected them on the court, and then off the court, you were able to come together and talk about the match or be friends. And just like life, there's a handful of people that you cared nothing for on the tennis court and cared for nothing for off the tennis court. But yeah, we had a unique bond, and it's still some of the people that I have relationships with to this day. We can still reminisce about the days of tennis and the trips that we took together and the times we had. So it definitely a unique culture.
That's awesome, man. So yeah, so you worked into like the tennis shop. Did you ever give lessons to people?
I did. As I aged, I started to give some lessons, and that's one of the things that probably that I, if I didn't go into the world of insurance and benefits consulting, I feel like I would have made a pretty successful tennis coach, because I have a passion for teaching, have a passion for showing, and can really see things. It was weird about my own game. It was tough for me to identify some of the issues that I'd have on the court, but when I'm watching somebody else play, I can pick up on something needs to be tweaked here, something needs to be tweaked there, and effectively communicate that. So it did lead to some private lessons, which I had fun with. And actually, it was interesting. It led me to, in 2011, I actually volunteered and was the boys high school coach at Innsworth High School, which is a local private school here in Nashville. And so I got to coach the boys team through the spring season, and actually was in charge of the boys and girls conditioning program. So that was actually a unique experience as well.
That's awesome. So did you teach as a teacher, or were you just doing the athletic side?
Oh no, I'm not. I'm very. How can I say this? I'm underqualified to be in education. But it was strictly just a coach.
Okay, that's awesome. And so, kind of going back to that, what you were talking about, you said it was hard for you to identify what you had issues with, but it was easy to pick up whenever you kind of took a step back and could watch in. And I think the saying is, those that can do, those that can't do, teach, and those that can't teach PE.
Yeah, I've got to be careful agreeing or disagreeing with that comment, because I've got several family members and several friends that are in the education profession. But I think that can be. I think you can use that analogy in all industries.
Absolutely.
And I think it's not just. I think it's kind of grabbed hold in the education world, but I think it definitely applies to all facets of industry this day and age.
Yeah, I was totally talking about tennis, not definitely saying anything about the educational system. My wife's a teacher, taught for many years. Now she's in administration, but yeah, I do not envy that job whatsoever. Nope. The education system is, it is what it is, but it is not something I could ever be a part of.
Right.
And I've coached at the high school level too. I understand like the difference once you get into a school environment versus being on the outside through a club sport. It's a totally different world. So
it is. Learned a lot about myself, learned a lot about people, and made some good friendships out of it. So
that's awesome. Well, hey, let's kind of segue into your business life. So, you went the tennis route for a little while, then joined your dad in the business. left the business, went out on your own, and then came back as the president of the company. Can you kind of just walk us through a little bit of that and go as deep as you'd like to or feel comfortable?
Yeah, absolutely. So started with dad right out of college, and as I said, mom was working for him. Dad's name may have been on the firm, but my mom was the one who ran the company. And it was cool to watch them work together and be able to work together as long as they did and be successful as they were. So yeah, like I said, we decided to go father son versus employer employee. So took a step back, stayed in the employee benefits space, but realized that I had a passion for helping people. And so I got more involved in the benefit communication, enrollment side of things, looking at technology, did a lot of stuff, helping with, enrollment firm type business. And then I realized that brokers, consultants only had so much bandwidth. And they really were focused on that medical renewal. And after that, it's kind of everything fell by the wayside. So started looking for innovation to bring to brokers, consultants, whether that was benefit communication, whether it was new technology that was coming out in the marketplace, adapting, telemedicine, whatever was up and coming in, as our industry, a lot of things, it trickles down, starts big and works the way down to small.
Sure.
I tried to bring that technology from the big space down to the small to mid-sized businesses and using a network of brokers. And so just did that until really 2012. And at that point, my dad had transitioned out from client facing with the exception of a handful of clients. And he needed some help getting his organization ready to sell. And so I came back, helped kind of tidy things up operationally, marketing, sales, just to be able to kind of hand it over to the potential new owner. And as all things, the sale kind of unraveled at the 11th hour. And that kind of left my dad in a unique position because he wasn't client facing. So I, at that point, and we had talked, and my mom would tell me this about my dad, and just for audience purposes, my dad has passed away in January of 15. So it's been almost 7 years. And actually today, October 6th, is his birthday. He would have been 75.
Oh, wow.
Funny that we're doing this on his birthday, but my mom had always said that, your dad started this company, to eventually hand it off to you as a legacy. And even though we had our issues, when I was a young college graduate, thought I knew everything, and he was an established veteran and we couldn't see eye to eye, he still had that place in his heart for me and for group benefit systems. And so at that point, when we were looking at the selling of the company, and things weren't, we could have go two directions. You said, you sure you don't want this? You don't want this? And you start to kind of at that age. So 7 years ago, I was late 30s. I'm looking at that going, man, this, start to reflect on what it's done for my family, what it's provided for our family and all the employees and their families that have come through the doors. And it just kind of hit home. And at that point, I was like, you know what? Let's do this. And at that point, I stepped into the role in July of 14. We had some adversity to overcome with a former producer that most people, my dad was a handshake guy and a very strong Christian. And one of those strong Christians that he's not going to, be out there preaching on the corner. Not the religious type, but the spiritual type. And so that's the way he did business. And, he got burned by a relationship. And so really for the next 6-7 months, I was forced into a situation of not only running a company, but saving a company. And so we I had a great team with me, still have some of the same team members back then. We bootstrap, rolled our sleeves up, put on our work boots and got to work. And we did a good job bringing kind of everything back together. But then unfortunately at the end of 14, my dad got hospitalized and was in ICU for 4 weeks and ended up passing away in January of 15. And so at that point, my mom, who was, who had worked for my dad forever, alongside him, she was at that point just grieving the loss of her soulmate. It just, for me, it was at that point, it was a mission. And so really working to support my mom, working to, support group benefit systems and the family, the families that work for us, and then the team, and then the clients, we just, once again, we persevered and buckled down, and really since 16 have had a great run, have a great group of clients, great group of employees. And we know employees come and go, and we've had some, some great ones leave us for various reasons, but we've got a great nucleus at the company now. And now we're just, doing our benefits consulting thing.
No, that's awesome, man. I really appreciate you sharing that story with us. I know it's not an easy story to always share, and it sounds like your dad was an amazing guy, and went way too early. But
it's funny. I'm gonna interject a tidbit about my dad. So when we had his funeral, and this is pre-COVID, so people could get together. We had it at the local cemetery here, and many people have had their funerals there, unfortunately. But the funeral director comes up to us and goes, "Who was your dad?" I'm like, "Just my dad." He goes, "Not a celebrity, not a politician?" I'm like, "No, he just my dad." And he goes, "Well, I want you to know that we had George Jones's funeral here either like a couple months ago or a year ago, and you guys probably had 5 times the amount of people. Ended up having like 600 people at his funeral."
Wow.
And it was just it was incredible. It was incredible support that our friends and family and community provided to my family at the time, because I'm an only child. So that's what, people after they get to know me are like, "Oh, that makes a lot of sense." But at that point, you don't have any siblings to lean on, and so all the friends and family that support us was incredible. But it just really showed what type of person my dad was.
Absolutely.
And it gave me it continued to influence me in the way that I want people to look at me. It's like, it's always said, it's like, if I can be half the man that my dad was, half the father, then I'm going to achieve, I'm achieving something. And it was just a testament to him and who he was as a person, as a dad, as a husband, as a friend, as a mentor, as a business owner, the people that came out for that. So I just want to add that little side note.
No, that's great. As I call them, value hammers. The value hammer that you just dropped there it's about the dash in between your birth and death. And I know there's a couple of stories out there that talk about this. You on your tombstone, you see when they were born and when they passed, and that dash is your legacy. And to have 600 people show up at his funeral is a huge testament to who he was. Most people are lucky to have family there and a couple of friends.
Yeah.
To have an entire community come out is a huge testament to who that person was. And it's what we really all should strive for. I mean, the things of this world are temporary and they'll fade away. The impact we leave on other people's lives, sharing the love of Christ with other people as your father did, obviously, those are what are remembered on, not anything else. And so, you'll remember the pieces of his business and, the things that you guys, saw and went through, but most people won't. Most people remember his character and who he was. And so appreciate you sharing that with the audience.
Yeah. Appreciate you letting me share it. It's
Absolutely.
It's a story I don't get to tell very often, but I always enjoy it when I do.
Absolutely. I want to ask one more if you're okay with it. So when you left the firm the first time, you said, "I was a young college guy that thought he knew everything, and he was the veteran trying to help me understand." And I may have paraphrased that, I apologize. There is an audience out there that is young, and there's an audience out there right now watching that is a veteran, and both have a role to listen to the wisdom of those that have come before them and or mentor those that are up and coming on what this industry is about. And it really has gotten away from this, kind of like what you said. Insurance used to be affordable, and it's not anymore. It has become the money pit of from what I believe, all evil, and what is driving a lot of the corruption in our nation. But we have a responsibility to society as veterans to mentor those that are coming up, and those that are coming up have a responsibility to listen. So if you don't mind, just kind of share a little bit about both roles that you've probably been in.
Man, it's a great question. And the key word that I'm going to focus on is listen. Both ends of the spectrum have to listen.
Absolutely.
The fresh out of college kid needs to listen, and the veteran needs to listen. And so, college for me was, golly, what is it? I graduated in 2000, so 21 years ago. And I know college scene, college is different now than it was then, and 20 years prior to that, it's different. But you come out with all this knowledge, and especially being a marketing major, you're coming out with all this knowledge, and you want to set the world on fire, and you want to be able to take what you've learned and use it, immediately. And so when you come into an organization that was started in 1978, and this is 2000, so 22 years, where my dad built it from scratch. He didn't go out and raise capital. He didn't have angel investors. He literally built it from scratch. And he was in his 55 at that time, or no, 54. So, he had been there, done that, established a good business, and had a way of doing things. Doesn't necessarily mean they were the right way or the most efficient way.
Sure.
Well, I'll take it back. Always ethically, he did the right thing, but
Good.
he maybe didn't always do it the most efficient way. Sure. And so when you come into that, when those two worlds collide, you think you know everything coming out of college, and then as the veteran, you think you know everything, and you have to be willing. You have to be able to communicate. It's the newbie's not always right, the veteran's not always right. And so what I try to do with my team members, and I've had, and the team member, I've got people that work for me, they're working for me that are in their early 20s, and I've hired people that work for me in their mid to late 40s. So they're seasoned career individuals. And I tell them, I say, listen, I profess, I do not know everything. If I did, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. I'd probably be on the beach somewhere if I knew everything, because I'd have a whole stack of money sitting beside me. But I joke for the people watching, but I do know that you can be helpful. So you've just come out of college. You've got a handle on what's going on with digital marketing, with, technology, operations, processes, and a lot of it varies based on what they studied in college. Of
course.
But look at what we're doing internally. Look at how we interact as a team. What can we be doing better?
That's a great
advice. What are we doing well? How are we interacting with our clients? What can we be doing? What things can we be doing better for our clients? And so I really challenge my team to say, look at our operational procedure process, look at the things we're doing, and can we improve on them? And if we can, then ultimately what that does is that's a win-win for everybody. It's a win for the client, and it's a win for us as an organization. And for the individual, their creativity is not going to be stymied. I'm telling them, hey, listen, you can contribute from day one. Now, listen, that doesn't mean I'm going to hand you the keys of the kingdom and you're going to be able to go out there and start making sales calls day one, because there's a path that you need to follow in order to get the knowledge to be able to go out and then effectively communicate that to a prospect and be able to win that business. But there's other things that you can do to utilize your talents day one.
No, that's great insight right there. I think that is probably one of the best ways to explain how to merge this huge generational gap between Gen Z and boomers that are still in the marketplace. And then you've got, millennials and Generation X, 4 different generations in our workforce right now. And, everybody kind of has their own way of doing things and their own ideas and their own creativity. But, the way you said it was perfect. We're not giving you the keys to the kingdom to go out and do it, however you see fit right off the bat. But we want all of the feedback that you're telling us. I've mentored people in multiple different ways. One where it's like, listen, I don't want you to tell me anything for the first 60 days. I want you to drink through a fire hydrant for 60 days. And at the end of my 60 days, I want you to tell me all the problems that I have in my processes and systems, where you see a lacking of anything for communication that can help our team, our clients, everybody in between. I've tried it that way. And the ones is like, tell me everything as we go, right? And it kind of comes out 50-50 either way, right? And it's just being open, like you said, listen. Both sides have to listen. So that was great advice. I really appreciate you sharing that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things. What you realize is people want to be heard, and that's in business, that's in life, that's with whatever someone's going through, whatever is going on in our country. People just want to be heard, and I think that's what the biggest problem that we face in business and just culturally is. Everybody wants to be heard, but nobody wants to listen. And that's where we start to get in trouble as a business owner. When you stop listening to your clients, you stop listening to your team members, you're going to fail. You're going to
the beginning of your implosion.
You're going to fail. I mean, failure is inevitable, but if you really shut out everyone else and stop listening, then you're setting yourself up for big time failure.
Right. Yeah, you're going to have small failures along the way, right? But those massive failures, those ones that can eliminate your business completely, when you cut off the outside world. And I'm always very cautious about saying this too, but you can't listen to every voice either, right? I mean, well, you can listen to all the voices. You don't have to take their advice. Just because you're listening doesn't mean that you have to agree with them. And I think that's our freedom of speech is the piece that we continue to push forward with. Is the reason why we want to be heard is because we know that we have that freedom. We have the freedom for our voice to be heard. Now, the people that are on the other end of that don't necessarily have to take our advice or even agree with what we say, but having the freedom to speak is a foundational principle that we all have.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And for me, I think it's been magnified, starting in 2016 to current day, that we are so hell bent on having our voices heard that we don't do the necessary research on the front end.
Oh, you're speaking the truth
before we speak. And so, when somebody comes at, either comes at you or you want to go at them, my advice to people is like, listen, know your numbers. I mean, it's just the more data you have to satisfy your argument. And once again, you can have all the data in the world and you interpret it this way. That person may not hear what you say and they don't care, but you know what? At least do the homework on the front end before you try to have that conversation.
Yeah, don't have conversation as a headline reader.
Yep.
No, we're on the same agreement. And I think that goes for business as well, especially in the employee benefits sector. So often people will be headline readers and they'll go out and just start speaking things as if they're truth. Think of people, a lot of brokers get in a lot of heat that way, lose clients, win business, lose clients, lose reputation based on, I just read a little bit about this and now I'm going to go speak as if I'm an expert on it. Becoming a subject matter and your expert takes a long time. And 10,000 man hours is what is considered an expert. Many people spend less than 10 hours learning about a new process, system, application, trying to go out there and sell it to implement it. And I think the educational side is truly lacking in the employee benefits sector.
Agreed. 100%.
Absolutely. We're going to jump into that a little bit more. Being in the employee benefits sector a lot, I know that you could probably speak a lot of light onto kind of what's going on nationally from a healthcare perspective. I've had lobbyists on here. I've had David Blatt from Texas with the North Texas Association. We've had employee benefit advisors, vendors. We've had a little bit of everything on here, as well as people that are outside the sector as well. And so if you want to, we would love to hear a little bit about what's going on in Nashville and, what's your thoughts nationally on our healthcare crisis.
Well, it's, I go back to the healthcare system works perfectly. It works the way it was intended to work. And that's to line the pockets of three big players: hospitals, insurance companies, and PBMs. And there's a lot of people that are okay with that. And, you think back, it's like, where is change going to come from? It's, we know that when Washington gets involved in something, they completely screw it up. They may have
Yeah.
the best intentions in the world, but when you start throwing bureaucracy into something, be it the public or private sector, things go to hell in a handbasket. So I don't believe it starts in Washington. I think there's guidance that needs to come out of Washington. But it starts with guys like you and me. It starts with a groundswell. We saw what Haven tried to do with JP Morgan Chase and Amazon
Yep.
and Berkshire.
What a mess.
Thing
What a disaster.
the first thing that Warren Buffett said after it dissolved was like, hey, there's a lot of happy people that sit on the boards of hospitals, and they are perfectly happy with the way it works.
You're right.
So it's taught me that it's a grassroots campaign. I mean, whether it's, if you talk politics, back in the day of the Tea Party, that was a grassroots campaign. If you talk about, now you go to the other side of the equation, you got the progressives, it's a grassroots campaign. It's not like the progressive or the Tea Party showed up overnight. It was a groundswell. And now they are where they are because of all that grassroots effort. Same with healthcare. It's got to start at the local level, and then it's got to make its way up.
Absolutely.
And it's got to start with guys like you and me, and start, others in the industry that are out front. Nashville is an interesting dynamic. We are excuse me, I apologize. I'm getting over an upper respiratory thing. So my voice is a little scratchy. So I apologize.
You're good. No, you're good.
But, Nashville's an interesting dynamic. It's the healthcare capital of the world. If you look at the national healthcare family tree, how many organizations and billionaires and millionaires have come out of it. But we're still very antiquated in our approach to health insurance. Healthcare, we're innovators, but health insurance, we got a lot of people that are still stuck in the fully insured way of life. And that's not bad. I'll be the first to tell you, I'm not going to sit there and say that the BUCAs are purely evil and all they're out for is profits, because they do serve a purpose in our market. But we also know that to experience true, what I call healthcare nirvana, you have to move away from a BUCA. And that takes time and that takes education. And it's just been really eye-opening to me about, the industries in the middle Tennessee and surrounding markets, that just not a lot of knowledge about what's on the other side of the fence. What is an independent TPA? What is a transparent PBM? What's direct contracting? What do you mean cash pay? Now, as the national messaging has gotten out there, and we're paying the PBMs, at least the big three, the way they are, and starting to talk about hospital transparency. It's starting to, it's kind of like with you in marketing, you got something in the background, and somebody brings something up, and you're like, oh yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. We're starting to see that connection.
Sure.
But it's still a uphill push to truly to get an employer group to make that transition. And that's just a lack of education. And it's not that these our clients, prospects, they're brilliant people, but guess what they're focused on? They're
business.
on their business.
Of course.
And they deal with health insurance once a year, and it's one of those things. It's just ingrained that, hey, it's going to go up by 12%. And as long as their company continues to make money and their profits continue to go up, and it doesn't eat into their profits, we'll pay the 12% increase.
Sure.
So
the rise of inflation, right? Our rise of inflation has covered the cost of the increases of healthcare for the company's bottom line.
Yep. So, for us, it's just the national market is unique because we've got so many brilliant people here in healthcare, so many innovative companies in healthcare. But when you talk about health insurance and how you pay for care, it becomes a whole different conversation.
Yeah, I've always said that the most expensive way to pay for healthcare is through insurance. The same way that it's the most expensive way to pay for anything. If you're paying through your insurance, it's going to cost more. It doesn't matter if you're getting a roof, your car, they got into a car accident or something taken care of on your car. if you're paying an insurance premium, and then when you go to file that claim, you're going to file a claim, whoever the company is on the other end, they're going to increase the price because they know they're getting paid through insurance, and insurance companies pay it. I got a car windshield replacement. I live in Arizona, and so you have to have windshield replacement on your insurance policy because there's rocks everywhere. It's the major landscape out here. There's not a lot of grass down in the valley. It's a desert. Now northern Arizona a little different, but I got my windshield replaced, and I asked, hey, I need to get my windshield replaced. They said, is it cash or is it through insurance? I said, does it matter? They said, oh yeah, it matters a lot. And I said, well, what do you mean? They said, well, if you get it through your insurance, you don't pay anything. It's going to be free. But if you pay cash, we're going to have to figure out some type of deal because these windshields are, $500-600. Okay, well, how much is the cash? $600. Great. My insurance has coverage. Great. $0 deductible. I get the invoice. I look at $1,200 what they charge my insurance company. And I was like, why'd you charge them double? And they said, because they'll pay it. They were upfront. They're like,
Yep.
and that's our healthcare system. If you look at, any of our facilities, when you look at the charges, most of the time cash pay patients are going to pay, just above what Medicare or, Medicare is paying. Medicaid's going to be a lot lower, and your commercial payers are going to be 2 to 10 times higher than the cash pay patient.
It's funny. It's like if you think about profit centers or profit or loss centers for hospitals, the rule of thumb is about a 15% loss on, this is an average between your Medicare or Medicaid and, free care, charitable care.
Sure.
But then if you look at the commercial side, it's a 57% profit.
Right.
So that should tell you something. Like you
got to look at their payer mix, right?
Yep. And so it's what I try to do is I just try to have a logical conversation and try to bring it down to your everyday purchases, from groceries to gas to electronics, and talk about, hey, if somebody said, hey, I want you to buy my car, I'm going to give you a 50% discount. Your first question is going to be 50% off of what? That doesn't happen in healthcare. It's starting to, but it doesn't happen in healthcare. I'm saying, so why don't you ask that same question about healthcare? Well, my health insurance pays it, but you realize that your health insurance is paying 5 times more for that procedure. Same doctor, same hospital, same outcomes, because you're in a commercial health plan. And they're like, oh, and it's just, so the more conversation you can have along those lines, just the more that groundswell, that grassroots effort is going to take hold and really, start to permeate our society as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. 2 pieces there. One, the grassroots effort thing that we keep going back to. I think that a lot of times people feel like we're not still in the infancy stages of controlling our healthcare costs, and I want to call it healthcare reform, but I know that's been blown out of proportion. But it truly is. It's reforming the healthcare payer system, not the healthcare system in general. But I think that's one of the pieces that a lot of people think that this is like widely spread. Everybody knows about it and is doing it, but there are very few brokers in America that understand how this actually works. I'm not saying that there are not people out there selling this type of solution, but to understand the solution, understand the intricacies of it, how much goes in on the back end, how much work goes in on the back end, there's a lot of effort that comes in, and it is so much easier to put in a BUCA plan. I'm not gonna tell you any lies. Right now, I was actually talking with a client this past 2 weeks ago, and we were there and talking about their increase, and I said, hey, you guys spent more than you had planned to. It is what it is. It's the reason why you have a stop loss policy. Everything's going to be fine, but let's take a look at your rates. The owner pulls up the rates and he goes, well, gosh, man, I was paying more than this in 2011 when I had my family on the health plan. So, the premiums are from 2011. He's getting them in 2021 right now, 2022 renewal. But, the piece that we did talk about was how much work goes into this. I said, if you guys want to go back to a BUCA plan, I'm sure your broker is going to love it because he gets paid a lot on that. And he doesn't have to do any of this work that we're teaching him how to do. I said, but he's helping you contain your healthcare costs. And because of that, it takes him a little bit more work and he gets compensated pretty well for it.
Yep.
But you know, it was just that there are that aha moments to the employers that were having those conversations too. I think we should talk about it a lot more. You know, I think that in our industry, we're really, really hesitant to talk about our compensation with employer groups because there's this fear mongering in the back of our head that people are like, how much are you getting paid for this? We bring value. When we're bringing value to the table, you're paying for the expertise. Anybody can go write a policy and say, hey, here's, you pick the deductible. What do you want? What do you want your premiums to look like? I mean, that's order taking, right? That's not being suggestive and consultative. So I don't know where I was going with that, but you know, to lead down that path, there's so much behind that.
There is, and you know, and that's the thing about, you know, working with, you know, we've talked about this offline before, is you got to meet your client where they are. You got to meet your prospect where they are. And they may never be a fit for the transparent model we want to achieve.
Absolutely.
We want to achieve it. We see the value in it, but guess what? That client may never get there. They may never get there because of just the mindset and the employees and how they view that logo on their ID card. And it just,
or the need, right?
Do what?
Or the need.
Right.
If my profit margin is, you know, 42%, I don't care about 3% of my profit margin getting reduced.
Yeah.
The numbers don't make sense. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I apologize.
No, you're right. And so, you know, as much as you want to change the world and provide that, you know, what we know to be high quality healthcare at the lowest possible price, it's not always gonna fit. And you just have to be patient and you have to be understanding, because at some point there will be a time where that client or prospect will come back to you and say, yeah, we're there. Because that line of too much is too much will eventually catch up to some to your prospects, to your clients. So,
and I'm not gonna, you know, I picked up a lot of clients doing this back when I was in retail. I had these conversations with the C-suite, right? Owner, CFO, director of HR. I wanted everybody in there. I wanted an HR generalist in there. And then I wanted their top employee that they valued the most in that call. And one of the things that I've learned was having these conversations with companies that might not make those change immediately. Do you know how many phone calls I get, or I used to get, from people when they left that company and went and worked at another company that had a problem? I went and worked at XYZ company, and yeah, they're paying me a lot more money, but their benefits are terrible and they're out of control, and they're telling me figure out this budget and I got to do something. You told me about saving all this money on this healthcare. What can we do with this company? Can it work on this industry? I can't tell you how many times that I got phone calls about that.
Yeah. And you know, and that, kudos to you, because you see the value in having everybody at the table. You know, the CEO, the CFO, the HR, VP of HR and HR generalist, the top employee, because a lot of times that C-suite is making decisions for the population and they're strictly looking at the cost and they're not looking at the quality. So they're like, oh yeah, $4,500 deductible, $9,000 out of pocket. You know, sure, we got this. Well, you've got this, but your employee that's making $15 an hour, you know, a third of their pay is going to cover their premiums. And, you know, and if they had an event, you know, all of a sudden you've taken away 40% of their pay.
Sure.
So is that really affordable healthcare and quality healthcare? So it really it's really that conversation that's got to be had with all those parties at the table. And it's got to be a buy-in from that team. If no one at that team sees value in offering high quality healthcare at an affordable price, then you just say, you know what, you're right. Abuka is where you need to be. You know, if you guys ever want to make a transition, you know, we're here to help. So.
Absolutely. And, you know, I think there is something that maybe hopefully people can pull from this. It was probably one of the better deals that I had closed. It wasn't a huge deal. It was like 250 employees, but I'm talking to the business owner and the CFO and their HR. We're all sitting in a room together. We're having this conversation. This is where I came up with the top employee. And they said, well, how do you even know my employees are even going to want this type of solution? So bring one in. And I said, what? Bring one in. Let me ask them a couple of questions and then we'll find out. And they're like, great. So they pulled in one of their top guys. He walked in, he sat down. I was like, hey, I'm Anthony. I do benefits, yada, yada, yada. I gave him a little spiel. And I said, hey, tell me about your insurance plan right now. He goes, yeah, I've got a $5,000 deductible for me and my family, and we're paying, $1,800 a month for that. I said, okay. I said, you're a pretty well compensated employee. He goes, yeah, I'm probably one of the better salespeople here, so I do pretty well. I said, what would it look like if you had no out-of-pocket expense? He goes, that'd be amazing. My son's on this medication, and we hit our annual out-of-pocket max every single year. He said, at the time it's $6,350. He goes, that's $6,350 if I didn't have to pay for that, which would be huge. I said, well, that's just one side of it. What if I told you on your premiums, we could probably get them for about half that cost? And he's like, that would blow me away. He goes, that would be such an amazing piece. And we started adding up the numbers for him. I said, you basically just brought home 10% more in your income every year. He's a pretty high compensated employee. I said, does that mean anything to you, even though you're one of the top, employees here? And he goes, yeah, that means a ton. I said, who's your worst salesperson here? And he said, oh, is this person? I said, how do you think that would impact them? I said, they're making like 40 grand a year. That would make a huge difference. I know he's got 2 kids. He goes, I don't know about his, out of pocket expense, but I know that he pays the same premiums I pay. And I said, exactly. We turned around back to the owner who was sitting in the room listening to all this. And he goes, sign us up. And after that, I said, why do we not have these employees sitting at the table with us? It doesn't have to be every one of them. Maybe it's the second or third conversation, but as we get to that stage where we're like, hey, let's talk about noise and let's talk about risk. So risk is a your conversation. Noise is a them conversation. So let's bring them in when it's time to talk about noise, right? Bring them to the table, right? Let's make a numbers play, but let's talk about the employees too, because it's easy to talk about them at a high level. It's a lot different when that person's sitting there next to you and you're hearing about their personal situation.
Yep. Preach it, brother. Preach it.
So good stuff, man. We could drill on about healthcare till we're blue in the face, man.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I love it. I love these type of conversations. I hope that this falls upon some ears along the way that maybe changes some mindset and or just reconfirms. I listened to Gary Vaynerchuk for about 5 years, and I still drop in once every 2 or 3 months just to hear a message from him. But he says the same thing all the time. And he's like, you know what? The reason why I say the same message all the time is because maybe it's the, being in Sweden at a in-conference personal event that got you to hook, or maybe it's this video that I'm going to drop 9 years later. Whatever it is, I want you to hear this message. And it's the same message every time, and that's okay. Yeah. But it's going to be different when you hear it somewhere else. So we're going to jump into a pretty fun side of the episode, which is the beard. One of the things that really stuck out to me was your LinkedIn character that you have on there. That's really awesome. He's got a little beard and a briefcase. And so tell us a little bit about your beard and where it started, when you started growing it, and kind of a little bit about the history.
So I'm going to go back several years. So, throughout my growing up, I've had various facial hair, no facial hair, goatee, beard. But mine's a little bit more personal. So my dad, I never knew my dad without a beard. So when I was born, he had a beard. It fast forward, and when he was in the IC unit at Vanderbilt, he was intubated. So he was on oxygen. And every day I'd go in and see him, and and just be there with him. And one day I came in, and this was near the end, and his beard was gone except for a mustache, because all the feeding tube and stuff. It was, sure. So not to get depressing, but and so then I'm like, oh wow. And then at his funeral, not to get morbid, but someone has to identify the body. And checks and balances, make sure you're not putting the wrong body in the wrong casket and burying the wrong person. And so when I went in to verify, he was completely clean shaven. So from my birth until his death, I'd never seen him without a beard. So from that moment on, I've grown the beard, and it's gone. Trust me, it's never been your category of beard, and I mean, yours is top of the line, but I've gotten it pretty big where I've had to use, beard oil and stuff. But most of the times I'll keep it pretty well trimmed. But I've had a beard since his passing in January of 15, and don't ever foresee myself being clean shaven again. So I hope that my son Tucker will know me just like I knew my dad from beginning to end with a beard.
Yeah, just going back into that legacy, man. Just speaks very deep. That's an awesome story. I appreciate you sharing that with me.
Yeah.
I do have a question about it because that's a very unique piece. So when you joined as the president in 2012, you were clean shaven?
It just
some type of something.
Week to week.
Okay.
I could have had a goatee. I could have had a beard. I could have been clean shaven. So there wasn't really anything there.
Never saw like a drastic change. Like you didn't walk in one day and your clients were like, whoa, got a beard.
No. What? And that's the thing. It's funny. It's like now when I walk in, because, we have a lot of clients that have been with us, for
years,
30, 40, a long time. And so when we were making that transition, I was taking over, I'll still get called by my dad's name was Terry. They'll be like, hey, Terry. I'm like, oh gosh. I mean, right. Because with the beard, we look so similar and have since, from when pictures of him in college with no beard, it's like, wow, I know your dad. That could be you. And then fast forward, we just got those facial similarities. So people haven't really looked at me like, oh, you have a beard, because it's just, it's interesting.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I definitely got that because I was clean shaven my whole life. And then I grew out started thinking February or March of 2020. So this is like, almost 2 years. We're coming up at like a year and a half or whatever. So, people are like, I didn't even recognize you. I didn't even know who you were. Sitting in their office and they're like, hey, who's that guy? So yeah, I mean, my ID still, I'm clean shaven in, because in Arizona, you only get your ID like every 30 years or something like that.
Yeah.
But, I put it down. I'm like, I know I don't have the beard in the picture.
I know. Well, I used to have my head shaved. And so, that was the same thing with my ID. It was like head shaved, beard. They're like, wait. And then now it's like, I was fortunate enough that Tennessee allows you to get a new ID, more frequently than 30 years. So it more resembles me than it used to. So
mine's just laziness. I just don't want to go to the DMV and get another one.
I don't blame you.
Yeah, that's not a fun line to stand in. Doesn't matter what time you get there. You can get there 2 hours early before they ever open.
You know what? You brought our conversation back to healthcare. That's exactly what healthcare will be like if government runs it. It'll be the DMV. So
absolutely. That's a great analogy to it. Well, awesome, man. Well, hey, this last little piece, man, we want to know what you got going on. Anything new that you're working on? What's fresh in the world of GBS? And
we've got some pretty cool stuff going. We have recently started a GovCon division. And so, it was one of those opportunities that kind of came out of nowhere. The stars aligned, and we were just afforded the opportunity to really to get tied up with a really neat GovCon organization on multiple levels that can kind of service the entire needs of a government contractor. So we started with the preparation of that division in June, and we're about to unleash the hounds on the GovCon space. So we're excited to be able to help government contractors with their fringe benefits, with their compliance. We've got a really cool, government contractor built government contractor health plan that is that's going to be set in the world of a captive, which is going to be unique to the industry. So it's really going to target those really small to mid-sized GovCon employer groups, so under 1,000 employees. So we're excited to get that messaging out, and just really looking forward to helping those government contractors maximize their hourly rate according to the industry that they're in.
Yeah, if you don't, do you mind giving just a brief synopsis of what that means to be a government contractor?
Yeah, so depending if you're Davis-Bacon or the SCA industry, or you could be an IT firm, which falls into another category. You're required, if you have a government contract, you're required to spend a certain dollar amount of their hourly rate on benefits, and so the hourly rate's gonna vary. And so if you think about it, you've got to be able to track all of it. You got to track the different types of employees, track the hourly rates, and so the money that's being spent is being spent on what we call fringe benefits. That's ideally what you want to do. And so for every hour that you work, you may be spending $4.50 on benefits. And if you multiply that by 40 hours a week times 4.33 weeks, that ends up being a pretty good pot of money that employee has access to. And it can be spent on healthcare benefits, disability, life, dental, vision. Any money's left over can be rolled into the retirement plan. And whatever is not used on benefits or retirement, it will then be paid out in a cash benefit. The downside of paying it out in a cash benefit is that increases your, it's from a tax standpoint, payroll taxes that the employer has to pay, payroll taxes that the employee has to pay, and then that's going to up your work comp, attributable premium. And so we've got a unique opportunity to provide the compliance, the technology stack that can then tie into whatever workforce management system they're using, and then help them build a health plan where those fringe benefit dollars go further. So,
okay.
And that's one of the unique things coming out is the ability to go in and do what we're doing in the traditional employer space, providing some of these unique solutions in a captive setting to help them lower their healthcare costs, which in turn allows them to have that fringe benefit dollar go further and allows that employer to increase their profit margin. Because what most people don't know, you see all this money coming out of Washington. These GovCons are working on a very, very small profit margin.
Small profit margin, but big contracts, right?
Yeah.
So even though they're razor thin margins, they're still making probably a pretty good lick compared to somebody outside of that federal contract.
Right, correct. But if we can increase that profit
Absolutely.
margin, there's a huge upside. So
I think one of the words that you use there too with the captive piece probably needs to be explored a little bit more. From my understanding, and what I've seen in the marketplace, most of your MGUs are using captive to take risk over the top of, your stop loss anyway. So most self-funded plans, especially if you're doing anything that's level funded, is probably in a captive already anyway, maybe not controlled by the broker, but controlled by the MGU or somebody else that's taking risk above and beyond, where they're sharing that risk, because everybody is typically buying an insurance policy from one of the top 5 companies in the world that insure all insurances. And then from there, they're reselling it back down into all the different captive agencies and everything along the way. Because nobody's really sticking on top of that paper saying, we're going to take all this risk on this $50 billion of insurance that we have, right? Somebody else bigger is definitely diversified across the world, not just, that one little sector. I think a lot of people get a little confused on the captive side. Yes, it's a captive, right? But all that risk is not being held inside of that captive. They still have a stop loss policy to cover their block of business, right? So no risk.
Right.
Typically,
no risk.
right?
No risk. Yep.
Yeah.
No risk.
Yeah. And I think when we hear the word captive, especially anybody that understands captives from a PNC world, they think that they're taking on this huge risk where there's going to be a cash call if we, spend too much in our healthcare. And you just told me all the terrible stuff about how they're inflating costs in hospitals. Is that going to fall back on me if I take on this captive risk?
Yeah.
So
it's exciting. I'm excited to push out. We've got a brand new website redesign coming out here in the next 2 weeks that's going to highlight some of the stuff we're doing in the GovCon space, not to mention do a better job of telling our story with video content, and just really try to share our message further and farther.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you've got such a great experience in the employee benefits sector. Going to share that with the government contractor sector specifically, and using something that was built by government contractors for government contractors is going to be huge, because just like we were talking about with the employee, right? If we're building health plans that are specifically tailored to the employees, but they make financial sense for the business, you're going to have a much better scenario than this fits into our shareholders box. And that's what's most important, right? So yeah, I'm really excited to see that roll out.
Yeah, man, we are too, man. So
cool. Well, we'll keep the audience abreast of what's going on with you for sure. We'll put links to all of your, any upcoming webinars that you have, or any upcoming information, links to that new website, that new slick website that you're going to have up in the show notes as well. So
sounds great, man. I appreciate you having me on. It's been fun.
Absolutely, man. It's been a blast. When we'll catch back up with you as well.
All right, Anthony, I appreciate your time, man. Thank you, buddy.